island washed ashore. His family is demanding transparency. They are demanding a full investigation into what happened. They have retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump. They have ordered an independent investigation and an independent autopsy. In fact, Ben Crump told ABC News Live last week that Nolan's body would be flown to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy. And by the way, this follows Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn Jr.'s announcement that an autopsy is being conducted by the state ME office, but the results are pending because of toxicology test findings that could take several weeks. But authorities reportedly believe that this was an accident, that this was a case of drowning, that there are no signs of foul play at this point, even though they're continuing the investigation. But there are questions. For instance, according to CNN, Nolan didn't return to the dock with his friends that day, and his family didn't understand why he would separate from them, that he was supposed to take a different boat back, but didn't. Nolan apparently didn't have a cell phone with him. There were reports of an alleged altercation that day. According to the sheriff, one of Nolan's friends contacted the Coast Guard on the night of July 4th at around 11 p.m. Nolan's mom called the sheriff's office midday leading into July 5th. The family has concerns about why Nolan just stayed without friends. His mother saying to GMA, that we cannot answer. I can't fathom why he would. His father saying, we always told him if you go with a group, you stay with the group. In fact, Sheriff John Ledbetter previously indicated that Nolan may have stayed on the island rather
going on. And you know, thank God all young people, they have cell phones, and anytime you hear people raising their voice, they start the video. And so you hear on the video, Nolan saying, give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing? And that becomes even more relevant when you think about the story that they are presenting, that Nolan chose to stay behind. That's what they're saying. The glaring contradictions just jump out at you. The fact that he is there with his friends, and you look at all the videos, it seems to be he's the only black on the island, or maybe one other, but not many. And so
you hear on the video Nolan saying, give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing? This is the sound of a case breaking open. A viral video emerged from the island, capturing a heated argument. Initially, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, representing the Wells family, pointed to this video as critical evidence, saying it showed Wells demanding his phone back. The implication was clear: there was conflict, and it was connected to the device that held his digital life. The question of how and why it suddenly became central.
Each other, right? That is where our sponsor Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform with a full suite of integrated apps that seamlessly connect all your operations, from sales and accounting to manufacturing, even shipping. Odoo can automatically generate professional, sleek-looking sales orders, invoices, and vendor bills, and it can automatically assign sales teams and send email updates throughout each sales stage. They can even use AI to pull reports that help with your decision-making. For manufacturing, their apps can sync inventory with real-time production and purchase updates so you never run out of stock. And when it comes time for accounting, that's also fully automated. Odoo can create invoices, track expenses, and even summarize data with AI to save you hundreds of hours. You know what the best part is? You can choose your apps and even build custom workflows so it's all fully tailored to your business's needs. Look, take your business to the next level by consulting with an Odoo expert today for free at odoo.com/sidebar. Well, here's the thing. According to ABC News, despite Ben Crump claiming last week that Wells was asking for his phone back and that he was part of this argument, Nolan's reported good friend, Trayston Shepard, claims that's not the case, that there was no altercation that involved Nolan. He even claimed that Nolan isn't even in the video. Quote, that's me yelling. There was no talk about a phone in that video. Nolan wasn't on the island. And Shepard said it was a fight with a stranger. Shepard said that Nolan stayed behind after the boat had to return to shore because of an electrical issue, that Nolan had met a girl. This is something we've heard before, that he met a girl and he stayed behind. And
the boys say that Nolan told them he was going to stay and talk to the young woman. This is the central conflict. The narrative presented by the friends, that Wells voluntarily stayed behind, is directly challenged by the testimony of another witness. Someone is not telling the truth. This is not a misunderstanding. It's a fracture in the foundation of the investigation. The family latched onto this, seeing it as a clear indication that the full story wasn't being told.
Particularly people in the South, that's not an unreasonable concern. Historically, my profession, my former profession, has not always behaved in a way that's worthy of the trust of everybody in the communities that we're supposed to serve and protect. So the idea that the parents would be suspicious, would be concerned that the local authorities might not do a great job, I think that's fair. And again, I'm not casting any aspersions on the Jackson.
And I think for a lot of people of color, and particularly people in the South, that's not an unreasonable concern. Historically, my former profession, has not always behaved in a way that's worthy of the trust of everybody in the communities that we're supposed to serve and protect. This isn't about baseless conspiracy theories. It's about a lived reality. The family's decision to hire outside experts is rooted in a historical distrust of law enforcement, particularly in the South. They are not just grieving a son. They are fighting a system they fear will fail him a second time.
Little bit helps, and that may be a bigger contribution than you think to this case. This is what he told ABC News. I got to talk about this now. Okay, let me bring in Matt Irvine, retired detective, law enforcement instructor. I'm always happy to have Matt. I was really excited to have you on to talk about this. We haven't talked about it yet. In fact, right before we came on, right before we hit record, you and I were talking about what Sheriff Ledbetter had said about not rushing this investigation.
And that may be a bigger contribution than you think to this case. Sheriff John Ledbetter has appealed to the public, asking for any photos or videos from that day, a rare and telling move. This public call for help suggests the sheriff's office may not have a complete picture of what happened. In a digital age where everyone has a camera, the public's help can be the key that unlocks a case. This is a critical moment that underscores just how many questions remain.
Office, something along the lines of, we don't see any foul play here. We don't suspect foul play. That's a premature statement. And I think that, unfortunately, suggested to some people that they were rushing to judgment. So I think
Why do you think they said that? Why do you think, was there nothing outwardly to suggest there was foul play? And I wonder if they said that to try to calm some of the, the emotions that people had, but was there something on the outside that they could immediately determine there was no foul play? I mean, why make that statement?
We don't see any foul play here. We don't suspect foul play. That's a premature statement. Irvine directly addressed a major source of the controversy. He argued that the initial statement from the sheriff's office that there was no foul play was premature. This early declaration poisoned the well. To a grieving family, it sounded like a rush to judgment, a decision made before all the evidence was in.
Sounds like the young woman said he left her to go back to get on the boat with his friends. That's not necessarily a conflicting statement, right? Both things could be true. If she didn't actually see him get on the boat, that doesn't necessarily mean that he made it back there, and something might have happened along the way. So you'd really have to look at the exact words that folks used in describing what they.
Normally, young people have their phones with them and on all the time, but I think getting in water would be an exception. You're not going to get in the water with your phone in your pocket. Irvine offered a plausible explanation for the missing phone. It's common to leave your phone on the boat when you go swimming. He called it legitimate question, but not definitive proof of anything nefarious. This is the complexity of the case. Every suspicious detail has a mundane explanation. But for a grieving family, the accumulation of these small inconsistencies is damning.
If anything.
Well, the fact that he was separated from his phone for a period of time is concerning. Again, it's not necessarily evidence that anything nefarious happened, but it's a legitimate question. Why was he not with his phone? Why was he not posting things on social media? Why are these conflicting statements about how he intended to get off the island and with whom? Those are all legitimate questions. I think it's also fair to say that a lot of people don't trust the police. And I think for a lot of people of color in particular,
the fact that he was separated from his phone for a period of time is concerning. Again, it's not necessarily evidence that anything nefarious happened, but it's a legitimate question. The pattern is clear. One of them is telling the truth. One of them is not. The phone, the video, the conflicting accounts, these are not just minor details. They are the fractures in a story that doesn't hold water.
What kind of experts are those? What is that information? I mean, I imagine law enforcement's looking at that as well. Although, as we reported, at least at the time of this broadcast, it doesn't appear that Crump has turned over the phone.
Is people are conditioned from what they see on TV, what they see in the movies, to think that investigations happen very quickly. CSI results come back immediately, and that's just not the case. Toxicology, CSI, forensics, autopsies, investigations can take weeks, months, sometimes even years, and that's not what people are conditioned to see. And for families that have lost a loved one, any delay feels wrong. And so I think it's very important that the sheriff comes out and sort of tries to manage expectations, especially because, unfortunately, I think an early statement from the sheriff's office, something along the lines of, we don't see any foul play here, we don't suspect foul play, that's a premature statement. And I think that, unfortunately, suggested to some people that they were rushing to judgment. So I think
Why do you think they said that? Why do you think, was there nothing outwardly to suggest there was foul play? And I wonder if they said that to try to calm some of the, the emotions that people had, but was there something on the outside that they could immediately determine there was no foul play? I mean, why make that statement unless they probably saw something?
Well, you're exactly right. And I think it's just a question of wording. If they had said, we don't see any obvious signs of foul play, but we are going to conduct a thorough investigation, I think people would have received that statement better. I think the way it was
they did
worded
say they're
was
still
unfortunate.
investigating. They did
Yes.
say that. They said there's no foul play, but we're still investigating.
Right. And I think really what that means is there's nothing obvious. There's nothing clearly that indicates foul play. I think, unfortunately, people interpreted that as that they had already kind of reached a conclusion prematurely.
What do you make of these different narratives, right? So you have the questions being raised by Ben Crump, and then you have this friend who came out, Nolan Wells' friend, who came out and said, this information about there being a fight, this idea of him being at a pool party, it's from the wrong day. To see this conflicting accounts, almost conflicting accounts, right? What do you make of that?
Well, there's a couple of things seem to be going on here. One, there has been a lot of speculation and a lot of misinformation in this case. Sounds like, from what we're hearing, that image from the pool party, even though it didn't come out till the weekend of July 4th, was actually taken a week or so earlier. There is some question with that recording about who is arguing with who about wanting their phone back. The friend said it's him and not Nolan Wells. So there is just a lot of speculation and misinformation out there. And then, as to the statements from the people on the island, you'd really need to dig down to see exactly what they said. Sounds like the friends told law enforcement that Nolan Wells wanted to stay behind to talk with some young woman. Sounds like the young woman said he left her to go back to get on the boat with his friends. That's not necessarily a conflicting statement, right? Both things could be true. If she didn't actually see him get on the boat, that doesn't necessarily mean that he made it back there, and something might have happened along the way. So you'd really have to look at the exact words that folks used in describing what they thought happened. And it's not unusual in a case like this for different people to have different perspectives and for those to appear to be in conflict.
You have to imagine that when this friend, Mr. Shepard, comes out and makes these statements, there are those, and remember, he said he's getting death threats, right? Yeah, he and his friends are getting death threats. You have to imagine people are going to be like, is he telling the truth? Is he credible? I have to imagine law enforcement has backed up his story or have spoken with him and investigated him. And I don't imagine he would have come forward and done these multiple interviews unless he feels he's telling the truth, unless he has evidence to back it up. I mean, otherwise, a lot of people would just remain silent. I find it interesting that he has done interviews with GMA and Rolling Stone and has, tried to clear what he says is misinformation out there and clear his name. And obviously, he talks about receiving these threats, but I think that's significant, right? I mean, how much does that weigh in terms of his credibility?
I think it says a lot about his credibility and his intentions that he would put himself out there. He was not initially named in any of the public statements, so he's choosing to be named and choosing potentially to open himself up to the kind of threats that some of these other young people have received. Very important that everybody involved in this visit to the island be interviewed, that they be interviewed separately, and that the police are appropriately mum about what they're hearing from different people. Because if, in fact, something nefarious happened, you don't want to give people an opportunity to kind of coordinate their statements. And if it's an innocent situation, you don't want to be leaking information about what other people are saying, because there's just a natural tendency to have statements get contaminated when people hear what other people had to say, and they'll sometimes conform their statements in their recollection to kind of fit the narrative that's out there. Not again out of any nefarious reason, but just because that's kind of how memory works.
You have to imagine police are looking at that video of this argument, right?